Welcome to our Sociology of Global Social Problems class. For this class, we are going to use a textbook called Global Problems, The Search for Equity, Peace, and Sustainability by Scott Sernau. For this video today, I wanted to talk about the introductory chapter. So in the very first introductory part of this introduction chapter, the author is introducing us to concepts such as globalization, and then also being more precise about economic, political, and cultural globalization processes. So this introductory chapter has about 2 pages where it introduces the topic of globalization, and then on page 3 it really gets into ancient history. So as a sociologist, I'm not necessarily the biggest historian, and so this is interesting for me to learn as well, just thinking about and getting our perspective time-wise. So the first time period we want to understand is that Homo sapiens were established about 200,000 years ago in Africa, and from there migrated outward into nearly all parts of the globe. So you have 200,000 years ago, Homo sapiens in Africa, perhaps 100,000 years ago, this mass migration out of Africa where Homo sapiens ended up in all parts of the globe. And this section also focuses on what scientists estimate as the time period in which Homo sapiens landed in each part of the globe. And so they're saying about 12,000 to 20,000 years ago, Homo sapiens ended up in North America. And so the next time period for us to really memorize is that he states about 10,000 years ago, the great trade centers of the Middle East were growing into major population centers. And then the first cities, the birth of the first cities as we know them, started about 5,000 years ago. So those are some big time markers in human history that we establish in this introductory chapter. So 200,000 years ago, 100,000 in North America, around 12,000 years ago, and then the establishment of these trade routes, and then the establishment of cities, which is really the establishment of human social institutions then. So 5,000 years ago, with the establishment of cities and these kinds of formal processes is really where sociology would begin. And indeed, we have sociologists who have looked at what, for example, Emanuel Wallerstein called world systems. And so really looking at the world as a global system of trade, of culture, of political information, and so on. That is the crux of what we're looking at in this class, and we're just establishing these kind of ancient historical perspectives in order to understand our globalization of today. So the key sections of this introductory chapter focus on this earliest human migration out of Africa, establishing these migration routes, these trade routes, and then the establishment of more formalized trade processes just because of these established migration pathways. And then it jumps into European colonizers and explorers who are leaving European nations via the sea and also end up conquering and dominating and taking over a lot of these other lands that they find themselves. And so within 3 pages, the author covers this kind of European colonial empire that's going out from Europe as seafarers and conquering and taking over the lands that they encounter in order to extract resources and to establish them as part of these trade routes, either forcefully or luring them in with the resources that they're able to provide. Then there's a section called Empires in Collision starting on page 8, so it already jumps forward to the major empires that have been established in world history and ending all the way up into the 19th century colonial empires and wars, and bringing us all the way up to World War I, basically. So this introductory chapter is taking this sweeping view of human history since the dawn of time all the way up until World War I. And so since this introductory chapter is so dense and packed with such dense historical information within 13 pages, I do want students to take time to focus on one particular aspect of this historical migration processes and write about it in our discussion board. I'm going to include a description of the discussion board assignment as I'd like students to focus, but basically you're going to pick one trade product or a cultural product or outcome of these migration trade routes and write about that particular issue. So for example, focus on one item such as tea and talk about the transportation of tea through these trade pathways and the history of that product and the current outcomes today. At the very end of this introductory chapter, he has some key terms for us to focus on under the section called Towards a Global Century, and that includes capitalism, imperialism, and industrialism. And so within this introductory chapter, there's just a few key concepts that are highlighted and bolded, and we want to make sure that we include these key concepts in our discussion board posts. Hopefully at the end of this introductory chapter, we can orient our perspective to understand this grand historical ancient history trajectory of Homo sapiens leaving Africa, establishing these global migration pathways. On top of those pathways are established trade routes. And then later on, about 5,000 years ago, are the origins of ancient cities, which would develop into more complex human cultures. And that is especially what sociologists are interested in. And so in the next section, I'll share with you a screenshot video of the details of the assignment and exactly how to do it. I pulled up the discussion board 1 over the Introduction to the Global Century chapter, and I want to walk through the instructions with you and also just show an example of a bit about how to approach this assignment. The Introduction to the Global Century introductory chapter in our textbook is just this huge sweep of human history spanning 200,000 years. So we just want to take a breath and absorb this information and apply it to our own example. So there's several different sections of this assignment that I want to cover to have you apply the specific key terms. So first of all, do the assigned reading and check out the WordPress course blog overview that I've put together. Usually I tell students never ever start your papers with, since the dawn of time, this social problem has been going on. And so this is the rare first instance case where I am asking you to write an introductory section that sweeps all of human history. So in this introductory of the discussion board, the point of it is for you to really memorize the historical years that scientists have put forth for our understanding of human history. And so we do want to go back to the dawn of time and apply these concepts to a specific example of our choosing. And we're going to choose a product, either a material product, a cultural product, or something like that, to the human history of trade within that product so that we can understand the different global processes of migration and trade and empires and apply these key terms from this particular chapter. So in this introductory section, I just want to make sure that you have down these key years that the chapter points out so that we have this understanding of how long our human history has been in existence as far as the scientific evidence and the different time periods so that we can really have this broad perspective on human history. And this will help us understand our more contemporary issues around globalization. And so in the next two sections, we're going to focus on two different time periods. So we have this since the dawn of time introduction, and then we're going to have a section on the establishment of human migration pathways and how those naturally transformed into trade pathways, and then from these pathways established human settlements, density, and then these ancient cities that arose, say, around 5,000 years ago. And so we want to pick one particular product, and I'll use the example of tea, and how that moved historically in these ancient times through these human migration pathways, and then how particular empires came to engage in the trade of that particular product. Be sure to let me know what topic you are choosing, because I do want students to choose different topics and have an array of topics so that when they present to class, we can learn something different from each person. And so in the Origins of Trade section, and in this prompt 1, we just want you to define this earliest establishment of a migratory pathway and how it came to be used. So these, for example, could be something like the Silk Road or different seafaring pathways. And then in the next section, we want to jump ahead many years to the establishment of these grand empires and how these empires then start to take over and establish control over the trade of that particular item. And so for this section, you should pick a particular empire, and it could be one of these listed here or another, and then continue on with a discussion of your particular cultural product. And in this section, it is imperative that you use the key concepts from the chapter capitalism, imperialism, or industrialism. So use one of these terms or all of them and just define the term and apply it to your specific example. I have the discussion board requirements outlined here, the introduction, use of subheadings based on the key terms from the textbook, 750 word count minimum, 2 academic journal articles, and you will cite the textbook both in text and in the reference list, as well as the 2 academic journal articles. Make sure your reference list is properly written. That's the first thing I look at. And then you're going to have a comment on one other fellow student that is at least 100 words and that it's focused on the material at hand. And you can even cite the textbook in your comment. And then some students will be presenting their blog post to the class. And so therefore, all of us should have a section in the discussion post where you're either asking certain discussion questions to the class or proposing a potential classroom activity so that we can get student engagement on the topic and applying this knowledge to an activity that can really help us absorb the information. And at the bottom here, I do have a list of these key terms that were in the chapter or related to the chapter. And so in class, we'll discuss these key terms, but definitely every student should be able to describe all of these key terms in your own words. And every chapter will have key terms and concepts, and so it's really crucial that you really understand, can define these key concepts on your own and apply them to an example, because every subsequent chapter, of course, will just be building upon what we've already learned previously. So it's really important that you have these down. And in our class, since I have posted the video overview and the WordPress overview of the assigned readings, I'm not going to be lecturing in class, but I really want to make sure that the students have understand and absorbed the information and that they can repeat it in their own way and also apply it to examples. So in class, we're going to have a lot of classroom discussions, and so I'm going to be calling on all of you to be able to define these key concepts, to come up with your own ideas and perspectives regarding these concepts, and to apply them to new examples that are not in the textbook and that are different from the work that your classmates are also doing. The assignment does require that you use 2 outside academic journal articles, and so I just wanted to cover that with you. I'm in the Standish Library website, and I'm using my example of tea as the product, which I'll follow through these historical migration pathways as well as a more contemporary empire. So I'll just put in some key terms, ancient trade routes for tea, and see what comes up. Okay, so here's a journal article talking about ancient trade and settlement routes, the ancient tea road, a video. Of course, we're looking for academic journal articles. Fruit from the sand, the Silk Road origins of the food we eat. Something like that would be a good source. So you want to find 2 different journal articles talking about both the ancient trade practices of your particular product and the ones under a more recent great empire. And you'll also cite the textbook as well. So the textbook, you're using the key concepts, but then you want to find these outside academic journal article sources in order to illustrate more specific information from historians on your topic at hand. And so, of course, before you choose your topic, what you should do is come to the website for the library and search around different topics. So you might find a topic while you're doing your search. So don't be too set on a topic. You want to first make sure that there's a lot of information out there on that particular topic. So this is the time when you would both establish your topic and find your resources. And so you don't want to pick a topic, of course, before you find resources. So just see what is out there and change up your key terms, change up your topic to make sure that there's adequate academic sources for you to cite. So I look forward to seeing your work and what you come up with, and definitely let me know what you learned about this vast sweep of human history. And in the next chapter, we'll get a lot more specific.